I have been thinking about you during this week because of New York and what happened in the mayoral race there. And you went through your own mayoral race in the city of San Francisco that also used ranked choice voting. And so this is New York City's first time using ranked choice voting. It was very much a disorganized campaign season, to say the least, in New York. And Eric Adams, arguably definitely not a progressive, appears to be the victor. But a lot of people are like, how does ranked choice voting help progressives? I don't get it. You ran for mayor in 2018. Ranked choice voting was in place. You ran alongside another progressive, Mark Leno, who ended up coming in within very small percentage points of London Breed, San Francisco's mayor. And you guys kind of campaigned almost together like a 1-2 slot. Just talk to me about ranked choice and what you think the prospects for progressives to win in future elections could be.
Mm-hmm. I think the big issue with the New York City mayoral primary is not ranked choice voting. It's that they held it on June, blah, 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 right? Who votes on that day? You know, we here in San Francisco, I mean, I know we like to always think of ourselves as more enlightened, but we do run our elections with congressional and presidential races, and that just increases turnout. So the big issue is when you hold standalone local elections that aren't tied to state and federal races, you're going to see a dramatic drop in turnout. There's about 8 million residents in New York City, and I watched the early results, but it was like 800,000 people had voted. I mean, that's crazy, right? And that hurts progressives. Ranked choice voting is great. I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting. And, you know, it's really based on the data. And so what we saw in San Francisco was RCV was instituted in 2004, right? And what we saw in previous elections where there was the general and the runoff, Nato, do you remember those runoffs like in December?
I do. I worked on them.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Like people were literally working through Thanksgiving, through the beginning of the winter holidays. And the turnout would just drop, right? So literally the victor would win with like a few thousand votes, which is crazy that many people would determine who their representative is. And what we saw consistently is that minus the 1999 and 2003 mayor race, where the turnout did increase between November and the runoff, because there's just so much excitement about Tom Amion and Matt Gonzalez. In every other race, turnout precipitously dropped between November and December. So if our goal is that as many people engage in election as possible, then RCV is the best way. But also making sure that you are syncing your elections with federal and state races is so important. LA City, another great example, their city council races used to be in like March or May, just these random days. They would have like a 3% turnout in those LA City council races. So, you know, that's always going to hurt progressives. That being said, you know, if you run a really, really effective ground game and you're determining the universe of people that come out, you can sometimes play with that, right? But I think just overall, we've seen that Democrats and progressives do better when everyone votes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you feel like RCV was not a real piece of this. I mean, a lot of people are also like, a lot of media outlets are like, well, progressives just can't win in New York and they want people of color who are moderates. And it's like, no, I don't know if that's the takeaway. Like Maya Wiley was very progressive.
Whether you consider de Blasio progressive in execution, he ran on an unabashedly progressive agenda, right?
Yes.
Before anyone knew what he would be like as mayor, and he won as a progressive. I don't think voters were like, oh, he's just saying that, right? And then he's going to become, you know, I don't even think we can call de Blasio moderate. But so I disagree with that. Clearly, progressives can win citywide. It is easier for progressives to win in smaller races because a really solid ground game can beat out more money in a smaller race. If you can door knock every door in your district, and we see this in San Francisco, and we frankly see this throughout the state of California, which we'll talk about as you talk about where is California headed. I've seen progressive candidates consistently win in smaller geography, and they beat out the candidate with more money because they're able to knock on more doors.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing I'll say about RCV though. It is true, you do have to run a public campaign with candidates endorsing each other. So Mark and I came out about a month early. We endorsed each other. We actually paid for ads, signifying that we wanted our supporters to rank either of us 1 or 2.
Yeah.
If you just hope that people can guess who the progressive candidates are or who the moderate candidates, it just doesn't work that way. Voters don't operate like insiders. They're not like, oh yeah, these are the 3 that I'm supposed to pick between. You have to make it, you kind of have to put it on a platter, and you have to have the field campaign go out and do the same. Here are the 3 candidates, put them in any order. These are the ones that are going to fight for our communities. And I didn't see progressives do that in this round. And 3 different New York City mayoral candidates reached out to me, and I advised 3 of their campaigns very, very early on, by the way.
Really? Early? Oh, wow.
Very early. Some reached out to me in 2019 to ask me how we did RCV. People were just curious, right? And I happily gave my time, sometimes to the candidates directly, but people were scared. It is scary to endorse someone else in a race, because when you do that, you kind of wonder if voters are like, oh, you're not good enough. But, I think we have to kind of get past that if we want RCV to work well for progressives.
Yeah. Jane, while NATO asks this question, or just really quickly, I think we're losing light on you. You're in the dark.
Is it okay if I walk away?
Please,
I was going to walk away and turn on the light. Okay.
Yeah, if you can turn on a light, that'd be great. We've got a beautiful sunset, though. I wonder if it's San Francisco, but yeah, there we go.
Oh, amazing.
Amazing.
And it's the magic hour. Your lighting is perfect now.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll be honest. I have become over the years disillusioned with RCV, because just based on my experience in San Francisco, because I agree with you about what you're saying about turnout. I have come to feel like if it was up to me, the system would be like for local races, we would have the first round in June or whatever, and then the runoff on the November election.
Yeah.
So that it would be locked into whatever the state primary cycle is. Because
I'm open to that for the mayoral race.
Yeah.
That is the only race where the turnout increases when there's only 2 candidates. But for board of supervisors, DA, city attorney, I mean, there's a huge drop off between the general and the runoff. But you're right, the mayoral race is the one race where the turnout does increase between the general.
But why are you so negative on RCV?
Well, because
sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. This is as a heterosexual cisgendered white guy, it is my form of reparations to never be offended when people interrupt me.
To never finish a sentence. There you go.
Yeah, I don't mind if people. Anybody can interrupt me. I don't care. So because voters are ideologically incoherent. Most people are, and so the idea that before RCV in any election, there's going to be some number of marginal candidates. There's somebody in every election, if you go back and look, there's some there'll be the major candidates who are the most funded. And then there's going to be a handful of people who are, maybe 1% of votes are up for grabs. And there's just some weirdo who's running on a platform of I want better lighting at laundromats. Or it's just something weird that's their pet issue. And with that, and there was statistical noise, but because suddenly their second and third, if it's a close race, their second and third choice matters. So I've seen campaigns where there's some marginal person who's trying to negotiate political concessions for their, who would be irrelevant. We don't want to stop them from running, but they're just some vanity wingnut candidate. But they want I want to be I want to get the key to the city in exchange for saying that I endorse you for my second choice candidates.
That's why I also feel like there's not enough information about not ranking people, that you don't have to rank, and I feel like that started with a little bit of Yang and a little bit of don't rank Yang or Adams, but that came in the day of the election. People were progressives don't rank Yang or Adams.
It's just it works fine when there's 3 or 4 candidates, but we've had these races, Jane, in San Francisco where there's 19 candidates, and it takes 15 rounds of RCV before we know what the deal is, and Like, and then people who get 500 votes are suddenly deciding the fate of the future. You know, I just like that part of it I find challenging.
I don't think there's a perfect election system. And I think in every single one, there's just, you're always going to have to work, you know, and I think progressives are always going to be working up against the system, no matter what it is, RCV, not RCV, there's always going to be an issue. And so I think I was leaned into, well, I want to be in the race where the most people are voting. Not necessarily because that's the election that I have the best opportunity, but I just from a level of principle, I think that, you know, we need to prioritize turnout so that representation happens. But I think that there are challenges to any kind of election. So, you know, when moderates are all arguing about this and that, I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I mean, you guys have a ton of money. You know, you're always going to be running whatever game, regardless of, you know, whatever rules we put up. In fact, you know, one of the kind of more humbling things maybe, you know, as a progressive, and I was certainly one of those supervisors, I put forward more stringent ethics regulations during elections on campaign finance, on advertising, on mailers. And what we found over the years is that all that happened is that all the grassroots progressive candidates were the ones that got dinged and fined when we looked at the Department of Ethics history, because they were the ones that couldn't afford the treasurers, the accountants, the lawyers, to figure out all the rules. They just got caught in the quagmire of all the rules that we had set up to protect the integrity of our elections. And by the way, I mean, they were all done with good intention. And the candidates with the most money, they had a barrage of consultants and attorneys and accountants that made sure that they figured a way around the rules, right? And not to say that those rules shouldn't be in place, but it's just an example of how important money is, and ultimately how it is really worth the value of taxpayer dollars. It is a good investment on behalf of taxpayer dollars if all of our races were publicly financed.
Yes.
And candidates couldn't take money from anyone else. Then taxpayers would finally get truly represented by the people who were running, because their campaigns would be funded by them. I really think that this is a great investment of taxpayer dollars.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the Bitchuation Room podcast live stream. And while you're here, why don't you just subscribe to this channel? I promise it'll be good.